the Congress will pass them. Lindsey Graham has been very clear about this. He's amassed over 80 signatures in the Senate, Democrats and Republicans. You'll have a similar overwhelming vote in the House if you have a vote there. And it'll be delivered to President Trump as a package to say, here is what you can do. Secondary sanctions on those who are helping Russia to evade the primary sanctions. It'll have a devastating effect, and you should deploy this. And I think President Trump will be tempted to do so. If it's approved by the Senate, especially with these wide margins, he can say to Vladimir Putin, look, Vladimir, I gave you every opportunity to avoid this, and you didn't.
At what point do you think those sanctions should have come in, or do you think Trump is right to give the Russians a bit more time?
No, I think we should have done this long ago. I think on day one of his presidency, President Trump put out the perfect tweet, which was talking about how Russia's economy is in bad shape, how the war is not going well, how this is going to get worse for Russia, not better. He can use sanctions, and that there's an easy way and a hard way. That was a perfect tweet. And after about a week or two would have been the right time to then start ramping up pressure on Russia, because Russia completely ignored it and has consistently avoided Trump's calls for a ceasefire and escalated attacks on Ukraine. It is making President Trump look weak.
And do you think this delay will allow Russia to start work on avoiding those sanctions before they come in, or are these comprehensive enough that once they come in, they really will have an effect?
Nothing is ever enough, in the sense that, it only works when it works. But I think this is a significant set of measures. Russia's sources of revenue are oil, gas, and of course the financial institutions that can process the payments. And trying to shut those down as effectively as possible is the best way to go. One thing President Trump is doing well is keeping global oil prices down for a variety of different reasons, but that is good. That also hurts Putin's budget, but we should be piling on with the secondary sanctions as well.
And at home and overnight, this feud between Elon Musk and Donald Trump has really reached a boiling point now. Do you worry there's a risk of distraction for the White House on the world stage because of this dramatic rift that's appeared at home?
Look, President Trump has been doing 1,000 things at a time already. I'm sure he can manage a full-on brawl with Elon Musk and continue to do everything else that he's doing at the same time. But it seems that the White House and President Trump are trying to calm things down a little bit. We'll see whether Musk agrees with that or not. But the reality is that as much as Elon Musk is powerful and influential and incredibly wealthy, the president of the United States ultimately has the power. And I think Trump is going to stay focused on his agenda.
Talks have continued between Russia and Ukraine in Turkey earlier this week. Just after those attacks on Russian strategic bombers, should we have expected much to come out of that this week, given the context?
Right. It's kind of hard to call those talks. You have Russia sending a low-level delegation to hand over a piece of paper that says it demands everything in the kitchen sink. The only thing they left out was Alaska. So I think that's not serious. Russia is still interested in prosecuting the war. They want to grab as much territory as they can, probably because they're making an assumption that they are going to have a ceasefire later this year. The reason I think that is if we do get these sanctions in place, we're targeting Russia's state finances. We are trying to dry up their foreign currency reserves to a dangerously low point, which Russia cannot allow. And if that's the situation by the end of this year, Russia may come forward and say, okay, we're ready to do a ceasefire. They might call it a goodwill gesture or something, but I think they'll be ready to do that. So that's what we should be aiming at with the sanctions. And when we have that willingness from Russia to really have a ceasefire, then I think it can be done very quickly. And then after that, I don't expect there to be any other agreement. I don't see Russia ever dropping these ridiculous demands on Ukraine about not having a military, about changing their government, about ceding territory that Russia doesn't even occupy at the moment. That's never going to happen. So I think we end up with a ceasefire by the end of the year if we squeeze the finances the right way. and then a tense standoff, which is frankly manageable. It's what we managed in Germany. It's what we managed with the occupation of the Baltic states, and I think we can manage that with Ukraine too.
And so, just to be clear, Kurt, and I apologise for putting the question to you again in a way, but in your mind, then those sanctions are war ending, really.
The goal, the goal is a ceasefire. Goal is a stop to the immediate fighting. But as I said, I don't believe Russia ever gives up its demands, and I don't believe it ever signs a peace treaty, which means that we end up having to deter Russia for the long term.
And we also, it's reported that North Korean missiles may have been fired alongside Russian ones and Iranian drones. It seems to be that some of Russia's new alliances have slightly fallen into the background. Is there more that we should be doing to deter Russia's newfound allies?
Well, I think that we are, in a way, we are engaging Iran directly now about the nuclear program. That negotiation seems to be getting some traction. It's a little bit hard to say. I think if that succeeds, then I think it'll be an important next step to try to peel Iran away from its support for Russia. North Korea is a harder nut to crack. I don't think anyone has ever had any success in negotiating with North Korea, and so I don't expect any real progress there.
And Trump, however, seems to have got this the other way around. After his phone call with Putin, he seemed to imply that that the US might work with Russia to put pressure on Iran over its nuclear ambitions. Is there a theory in that? Are there legs in that idea?
You know, there is always someone who believes in that theory. And we saw it particularly during the Obama administration, even during the Bush administration. Oh, you know, we need to work with Russia to put pressure on Iran. Russia has never done that. Russia has always done the opposite. They've always played a separate game with Iran at the expense of the West. We shouldn't expect anything else.
I imagine then you weren't too taken by Donald Trump's comment, "It takes two to tango," when he was talking about the possibility of further sanctions.
Yeah. Well, with that, you know, I think he's trying to delay the idea of sanctions on Russia because he really wants to pull Russia in to make a deal. I understand that logic. It is not that Ukraine is somehow blocking peace or that Ukraine is not willing to reach a settlement. In fact, President Trump has actually moved the Ukrainians on that to a point where they are now saying they will accept an immediate ceasefire in place. That's quite substantial and quite a come down from where they were about recapturing territory immediately. So I don't think it's quite fair to put it that way. And I also think that it's time. It's time to recognize that Vladimir Putin is taking Trump for a ride and will continue to do so unless we actually start getting tougher.
And do you think it is for the best that the US haven't put too much pressure on Ukraine about these recent attacks? I mean, you know, there could be a line of thinking of, oh, well, don't deepen your attacks while we're trying to have this negotiation. Were you happy to at least see the US not putting too much pressure on there?
Yes. In fact, I was looking at this, and the silence coming from the White House in response to the Ukrainian attacks was quite significant, I thought. And I thought a very strong message to Vladimir Putin, because I think Putin may well have expected. And in fact, Lavrov called the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, to complain about these attacks. And the silence from Washington was quite significant, saying, nope, we're not going to criticize that. I think one of the significant parts of that is that the Ukrainians were very careful to hit military targets. The Russians indiscriminately fire at cities and civilian targets, civilian infrastructure. They kill civilians all the time. The Ukrainians carried out a very substantial attack, and it was purely targeted at military installations.
Thank you for watching Frontline for Times Radio. For more on the war in Ukraine, you can sign up for membership at the link below or subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to the latest news and analysis on Times Radio or read it on thetimes.com. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.